yeah, I'm Karsten Vennemann. I'm a consultant here in Seattle. I've been in the QGIS group, and it gave me a lot over all these years, and excited that we're here again. And so I'm gonna show a map today. Here it is. And and if you want to see more on the window, it's printed. I have not printed a poster for like over 15 years. And because most of my work is database analysis, web-based maps. That's all I get paid for. And then I was doing an adventure with my son, and maybe it started here. So I'm going to talk about 3 different things. Basically, cool adventure. We had the bicycle trip in South America 3 years ago. Then there is some notes. I skipped the second one because there's no time, but the slide set includes, because one problem I had is from that bicycle trip, 3,000 kilometers in 6 weeks, from Lake Titicaca in Bolivia to northern Argentina, you see the map. It's done in 2 columns because it's a north-south and very long, and I wanted to show it at a certain scale, basically to have some detail, do like nice hill-shade cartography, and that's what I'm going to show you. And one part of this would be, if you would take something on like this, is how do you get to decide, what is the extent, the data, the generalization and everything to get there. But I need to skip it because I want to talk more about cartography. Okay, so basically you see here the trip from the north, border from Peru to Bolivia. And then the red thing is where we rode on the bicycles to Mendoza. And then the other stuff is, we took a bus to Buenos Aires later, and there's some side trips which are in the other color. And I skipped that. So basically we're gonna see, the first part is some pictures of the trip. So you get you heated up for, liking the map. And so basically this is Copacabana on the Lake Titicaca. First day cycling, crystal clear waters of Lake Titicaca at an elevation over 3,800 meters. So that's for non-metric vehicle, 14,000 feet. So first day we went to a place that was older than the Aztecs. Tiwanaku is on the same thing, just like, the ancient stuff in Peru. And yeah, we passed by there. On the first day, second day, my metal pedal of the bicycle fell off. And within the middle of nowhere, on the Altiplano is a barren landscape and where we have glaciers here, right? And they grow, wheat up there. It's different, it's tropic. It wasn't in winter, it's in May. And so, we were lucky that, these other cyclists which came actually from Mendoza, where we went to, and they have been cycling after COVID for 1.5 years, and they call them the Argentinian angels. They came to our help. They had some tools to help us repair that. After 3 hours, I was like on the right side. And then we entered Llama Land. So on the, some llamas, we went to the highest city in the world, Potosí, where you see in the back, that's a cathedral tower. And on the left upper, you see Cerro Rico. It's like the mountain where half of the world's silver is coming from that region. And for 300 years, the locals have been exploited, first by the Aztecs, later by, not the Aztecs, the Incas, and then, the Spanish, colonists for 300 years that financed the Spanish Armada and Empire. It would take about 2 years to get the silver to Spain from there. But to this day, there's a mint. They press like silver mint on there. So it's said this region had half of the silver in the world from that region here. And today, they have child labor and stuff, and there are still 80 mines. What we visited, and then you find on the market, it's the only place in the world where you can buy a live dynamite. So that's my son here. he's still with us. And then we went to the biggest salt lake in the world, Salada Uyuni, and we took some perspective pictures. And then we went into Argentina. Tilcara is in north, and we found Germany. Alemania, it means Germany in Spanish. So we found that place inside Argentina. I'm originally German, that's why. And then, we see some mountains. There's a mountain pass, 1,280 meters. We had like elevation gain of almost 1,000 meters on the bicycles, 25 kilograms of luggage plus the bicycle. And then we're on the famous Ruta 40, the national road that goes from north in Argentina, 5,000 kilometers to the south, where Patagonia is. And then we reached the magical number of 3,000 kilometers, magical 3. and then running into Mendoza on June 30th, 3 years ago. So that's the fun part. Now comes the cartography. So this is the map. Well, you see it over there. It's huge. And the reason is I wanted to show certain details. So I settled on 1 to 750,000 in scale. And then I had used mostly OpenStreetMap data for points of interest, roads. And so rivers was coming from something else. And I got a stipgap. You can look in the slide or get me later how I got there. And then, some other features. I had a profile. I sampled the route, converted to points, sampled each location so I could run statistics. So we went up 20,000 meters, it's 2.5 times Mount Everest in these 6 weeks, and went down 23,000 meters because we're starting high in the altiplano and going down. And then lowest temperature was minus 11 Celsius at night because it went winter. And we had no rain for 6 weeks, and we didn't see any airplane. It was just after COVID, the borders just opened. So there's some other things, and I started a small side project 2-3 weeks, and then 3 years later and 350 hours later, I have this map. So there's other features, with Matplotlib and a Python script, I imported the colors of the elevation. I have some inset maps for, a side trip. We get to the white city, Sucre, and here are the legends, and I will talk about some of this cartography because I've not done a lot of real cartography. I mean, I do cartography on, web maps and stuff, but here you have a defined scale, and it's, what it is. It's like my own teacher. I took one GIS class in my whole life, and basically the teacher said then, okay, a printed map has value added. It has like a specific defined scale. You cannot subtract. So if you have 4 classes of unemployment rates, that's it. You cannot go to 5 or to 3. And the same thing with this. It's defined, so it's optimized for that scale, everything. So I skipped that. So basically, the idea is how do you get from this data mass to this? So basically, well, you take 3 years and 350 hours, but I'm going to show you a little more detail. So data selection, the good, bad, and the ugly. I don't know. I skipped that. And so basically, if you look at cartography in QGIS, you have some cool options. And one is to use data-driven configuration of symbology and labels. So basically what that means is you can define a rule, and then you can say, okay, based on an attribute, on a column. And I added, for example, for the mountain peaks, I wanted to show sometimes just a peak across for the mountain peak, and the elevation in meters. And then sometimes, if it was a more prominent peak, I wanted to show also the name of it. For example, outside of La Paz, there is a peak. It's called Illimani. It's 6,500 meters high. It's like a glacier you see in the background. And I want to show that name, for example, on that map. And everything we decided was like a lot of stuff on the map is what was important to us. And then sometimes it's general things. So how do I do this label? So basically in QGIS it's very simple. You do something called rule-based thing. And you said I added 2 integer fields. And if I added as 1, it means show it. And 0 means not show it. And then I just added, my data set by selecting certain areas and then saying show 1 means it shows, the cross and the elevation, and show label or show name, in this case, it has a 1, it also shows the name. And then if you have these 2 things, then you can do that. And another one for settlements, like villages, towns, there is something called data-driven cartography in QGIS for everything. And you can place the label, symbology, and so on. And then here, you can place the label like in these quadrants, upper left, lower right, and so on. And because this one, some technology reason, the offset and pixel didn't work for me. And I have to admit, I had to do all labels for this map. And if you look at that in the window, it's crazy. I had to do it 3 times because of technical issues. And then so basically what I did is just added these 2 things. And I set 8 rules and just each a quadrant. And then you see these numbers 0, 1, 2, and so on. So I just added, so basically if I wanted to move a label, I just added this feature and say, okay, quadrant 2 instead of 0, and it moves from upper right to upper left. And that's how I did place these labels, because it's very kind of efficient. And this is just these rules. So going to some cartography, so I constructed some road shields. The Ruta 40 is one example, Argentinian flag, and they have that on the road. But Bolivia, for example, they don't have it. So I said, oh, I wanted something similar. So I just invented one with a flag, just to show that I'm a little consistent around that. I mean, why should Bolivia not have one? I mean, and then, on the upper right, you see something, I used some innovative techniques. For example, the points of interest, like when we cross the 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 kilometer or something crazy happened on the road, I have like a legend for like 30 points that were of interest to us personally. And I just used a point, but I don't show the feature. And then I have a call out as a label, which has these numbers, and it corresponds to the thing. And then there's this connection call out line. That's what I used here. And then I use just some simple things. The cycle route is just points with a drop shadow, and then like, our stages, like the days, where we stayed. I had like a camping sign, the green with a tent and the stars above it. And then there's also the house when we were like in some, hostel. And those are just stacked SVG files. So basically there's stacked labels. 2 SVG images, 1 tent, 1 circle, and a green fill, and that's how that is. So come up with some stuff. So I'm going for the simple to the more thing. Then we have something in QGIS. You can always go to this sign where it says draw effects, and then add drop shadows and stuff, and all other crazy stuff. And also I want you, if you never used it, there is blending modes in Thing. I'm not going to talk about it much, but for example, it goes such a way that you can do a lot of stuff that only can be done like in image processing Thing. Blending modes mean you can say, okay, I only want to lighten the points that are already dark from the rest of it. So it's getting pretty crazy. You can do that. So sometimes in cartography, you want to generalize things. And in my case, because of this big elevation difference from the Pantanal in the lowlands, which is also shown on the edge of the map, to like 6, 7, almost 7,000 meters sometimes, there, the elevation contrast is something I added since I showed this map last in Google. And so how do you show that? I wanted to show the 1,000 meters and 500 meters in the lowlands. But if it goes very steep, I want to show every 2,100 meters. So I do that. Okay. Well, math comes to my rescue. There is an operator called the modulo operator. And that means if you divide something by this number, if there is a rest. So if let's say you have elevation of 3,000 meters and you divide it by 500. So that's even. There's no rest. It's 6, right? But the modulo is 0. So I set these rules. If the modulo is 0, so divisible by this number, then show it. If it's not, not. And then I did say, okay, above 3,000 meter do this, and below do that. And that's just QGIS, straight out of the box. So it's to show, these lines without editing the data. And then now, half of this map, if you look at it, is, the elevation data. I used mostly OpenStreetMap data, some other stuff, and then the 30-meter Aster satellite DEM, I resampled to 90 meters because it was too much resolution. And then, one of the biggest steps, I wanted to have a nice hill shade. And if you see the DEM on the left, number 2 is a regular default hill shade. If you do it in ARC or QGIS, it would look like that. Or I have to admit, yeah, you can do better. You can, shade out the grays and make it transparent. But I wanted to do like a real nice hill shade. That's on number 3. Then I have a second DEM and with colors. And then you come up with the right, which is the background map. And I wiggled around with that quite a lot. So, and then you set some for these colors. You can set the low elevations a little bit transparent. And then there's something I probably have to skip because of time, but you can take the slides. There's a Python script called raster chunk processing. You never run out of, memory. If you want to have like 1 gigabyte raster, you want to make this hill shade. First of all, you can, denoise it, get like small variations out, and then do this sky model thing. I'm gonna skip this. There's some crazy illumination scenes with like not 1 light source, but 250 light sources, how this is done. So that's what I did, run some Python. So that's what the result is for half of that. Then let's show some things. So some stuff I did, there's something called shape burst fill. On the left upper is the protected area. So you just go from a line to like a certain distance inside the polygon, and then go from this line to transparent within 3 pixels. And that's like this, what you see on many maps, in an atlas or something. Then I want to go to some more innovative stuff. That's the last thing I'm going to talk. So basically, look at, I tried to make these bevel edges, to have this stand out like 2.5D for the salt lakes and for the lakes. And basically, how do you do that? I have this lake layer 4 times. I use this 4 times. One, I use a shape burst fill, that I showed with the protected areas. Then I use a second one to put on top. And then I use the same layer kind of represented by a line. That's what that is. And then I offset that line with something called geometry generator. So I scoot it to the northwest and then make that line, that's a little bit exaggerated up there. And then I make that line thicker and blue and put it under the lay layer. So basically you have a dark blue line on the northwest, and I do another one opposite with a light or beige line and do that. And then basically this comes out. And then you combine the 2 shape burst fills, 1 and 2, and the 2 offlines, and you come out with number 4. That's kind of how I got there. And then the last thing I want to show is what I came up with. I wanted to have not plain lakes or like the salt lakes. And I said, okay, if I make that totally flat color, that's kind of not interesting. So what can I do? Well, I come up with I use a raster fill. And then you have to make the right size. So what I took an aerial image of these salt hexagons, made it grayscale, put it in at a background, and that's, for the solar. And then I did the same for the urban thing. Took an aerial picture, made it grayscale, and have that. And then basically that's how that looks. And basically you put in, the shape burst fill plus the hexagon fill, and you have to make the right size to come up with something that you can actually see. I could make these hexagons bigger if I, change that size. So that's something I never done before, and it worked pretty cool. And then, that's just what you see at the map, and we're kind of at the end of the talk. I just wanted to go back. So if you go see, look at La Paz, you see that's kind of the transparent with an urban raster fill thing. And I have a lot of stuff I could talk about. I could probably talk 3 hours about the map, but see me and do take a look at that map. And for the reference, actually, here, if you want to know about raster chunk processing, there's 3 links you will find. Sky models and doing like crazy good hill shades, you find the information here. Yeah. That's the talk.
Can I answer questions?
Sure.
Did you have any problems with, like, maybe you getting like a road data set or some other data source from like Bolivia and then one from Argentina, and like did they message a connection?
Yes, I didn't include it, but it is actually in the slides. Yeah, for example, roads, the road levels, are different between different countries because there are different classifications, and then that also is in the OpenStreetMap, for example, for the roads. And especially what was totally problematic was the rivers. To have the right amount of rivers, I also had to select manually which are temporary, because the ones that are temporary, most rivers are temporary everywhere, and have like that hatch or points. So I needed to create some of that myself and do that to put it together, kind of.
Okay. Of all those tools, techniques, and everything you showed, roughly how many of them did you know for this project, and how many of them did you learn in the course of doing this project?
Well, I would say I knew 3/4 of this stuff, but like I came up with some ideas how to do this cartography, especially because I've not done it for a long time. And it was an iterative process. I came, okay, I don't like this, so do it a little different. I also went to some, how is it done in ARC, and how I can do a similar thing in QGIS with a bevel, for example. But I have to come up with my own thing. I didn't see a tool or something. So yeah, somehow I had to learn, especially also the hill shading stuff.